one of the Centre Court MBA Festival, I saw the most wonderful comments from participants, from viewers. So forgive me if I just have a big smile on my face all day, because I also know what's in store for you with the mix of panels, fireside chats, one-on-one interviews. But I wanted to start day 2 of the festival with a statement. Sounds like something that might be the State of the Union, but the statement is the following. It says, doing an MBA is a decision that can completely shift the direction of your life. Many of us have doubts if an MBA is the right path, if it will really boost our careers, if we can handle an MBA, or if we belong. So sharing those concerns, those excitements with others, and going through that reflection process to choose an MBA can be very enlightening. I wish those were my words, but they're not. I read them a week ago, posted by one of our panelists. Paula, thank you for providing today's introduction. And the focus of the panel, we know that next week, the FT will publish their global MBA ranking. It will capture the tremendous financial ROI of doing an MBA from one of the world's top business schools, the career advancement that you can look forward to. And Poets and Quants, John and his team will no doubt be reviewing all of those results. But today's panel focuses on personal development, sometimes the intangible things that are harder to catch up on. And we're constantly talking at Centre Court about the diversity of business schools and the people, the communities that they bring together. When I introduce my panel, you'll immediately see what I'm describing in terms of diversity. It's a pleasure to welcome Katsiana Pakomova. Katsiana studied tourism and hospitality in undergrad at Belarus State. She then had this fascinating career working in art galleries and as an art auctioneer, banging that gavel. I don't know if you're in the room when Banksy's work went through the shredder, and then went to the Rotterdam School of Management, RSM, and graduated in the class of 2020 to now find herself in a wonderful senior marketing manager role at Amazon. We can talk about trips to the Champagne region with your RSM classmates in a few minutes, Katsiana. Paula, who gave us that wonderful introduction, is herself an MBA. She went to IESE and is in the class of 2016. Prior to that, she'd studied industrial engineering. So there's that tremendous shift that she was describing, and had a great career in consulting and project management. Sandeep Tada is joining us from IMD. Sandeep is the MBA Program Delivery Director. And again, fascinating background, international hotel management, did his master's in organizational psychology. He owned restaurants, he owned a nightclub, but has spent the last 10 years at IMD in Lausanne. And if you think about diversity in business school, it's not just those average GMAT scores and GPA. If the London Business School ever published how tall their students were, some of you might be worrying, am I too short? Am I too tall? We're never too tall because we fill those boots, and it's always lovely to have David Simpson with us. David is the admissions director at the London Business School. He's been there since the school was founded in 1964, I believe. Maybe that was something on the internet that I read, and you have to be careful what you read on the internet. But thank you, all 4 of us, for joining us. I talked about this focus on personal development because we know all of those concrete skills, discounted cash flow and other things that you're going to develop. But starting with you, Katsiana, who graduated just 3 years ago, so many areas of personal development. So let's start there. What do you learn about yourself in an MBA program?
Well, like you mentioned, I have prior to MBA, I have worked on cruise ships, so on cruise liners, which is quite, let's say, untraditional background for for MBAs in general. I've done it for 10 years, and I really felt like some of my strengths were communication, because as a part of my job, not only I interacted with crew members from like at least 60 different countries, also the passengers, as international as the crew. And so in order to kind of like survive and thrive in that environment, you do have to have, you know, strong communication skills. So I always considered that my strength. But I think in the MBA, when you get put into those study groups, which is what happened, and different study groups during a different semester in the Rotterdam School of Management, it also kind of like throws you in an environment where well, you have to interact with those people, and sometimes, you know, the classes are long, and then the assignment time when you spend the time together with your club, with the group mates, are also quite long. And in the third, I remember just as now as an example, in the third term we had this live-in management process a project where we have received kind of like a consulting project, and we had to work for a real company on the solutions to provide them solutions. And this is when we really spent up to 14-15 hours sometimes together with this group. And at the end, when we already presented the results, we have worked with the coach and we were giving each other feedback. And I remember that the feedback that I received from my classmates were actually on communication. And I realized then, even though I consider something my strength, and even though I spent 10 years, let's say, perfecting that, once you're being thrown in a different environment, there is no necessarily guarantee that this is something that you don't have to improve even further. So I think that was at that point quite a learning moment that you're never done, right? Even with your best and strongest skills, you're never really done perfecting them and improving them.
That's a really interesting perspective. It's not just those areas that you know, perhaps are weaknesses or areas for further development, but even taking our strengths further and farther. Paolo, I mentioned, of course, that you had studied industrial engineering. I'm not sure what the gender balance was in that STEM-focused classroom, but aspects of self-confidence, that sense of belonging, how does that play into the MBA experience?
No, that's actually a great topic, and because as a student going through the whole process and the whole journey, when I look back, I think that self-confidence was probably the point that I developed the most. And I think that what made me really achieve the whole transformation, that was actually what IESE is looking for, right? We're actually looking, we're actually hoping that all the alumni or students go through a very transformational journey, that they're going to find the best in themselves. And self-confidence, and you've mentioned gender, and I think that this is a very gender biased topic, right? Where we do have more women doubting ourselves and if we are capable, if we belong. So it was funny that your introduction, you were reading my post and I was nodding, and then at some point I'm like, these words sound familiar. Okay, I wrote them, and I think that it's a lot about belonging, right? Because like many of us, and I'm not going to say just the women, but many of us, we come into the MBA and we feel like some sort of an imposter syndrome in the beginning, right? Where you're looking around and you're seeing all these amazing people and you're like, why am I here, right? And then as the MBA goes by, I think there is, well, first you were accepted in a great school, so you're feeling like the queen or the king, and then you enter and then you look around and you're like, wow, I'm not as good as I thought I was. So you have a deep in your self-confidence and your self-esteem. But then as the time goes by, you start learning more about yourself, and you start learning about what your strengths are, how you contribute, how you add value to your team. And then that confidence starts growing back and then surpassing eventually, you know, like the moment that you received your admission letter. And then you start trusting yourself more. And with the skills that you develop in the MBA, I think that that's when, you know, like you really understand the potential that you have and everything that you can achieve, because you're believing yourself. Because I think that there are a lot of barriers that we put to ourselves, right? Just because we think that we cannot do it, so we don't even risk it, right? So I think that with the whole self-awareness and learning more about yourself, and it's a very intense and self-reflective experience, the MBA. And I think that this really makes us grow as a person and self-confidence wise even more, right? Because like you have your self-awareness and you also have the tools, right? Communication, putting yourself out there, learning how to deal with conflicts in a diverse environment. There are so many elements in the MBA journey that will just add up to this, to building up your self-confidence, that at the end, you feel like you kind of have superpowers.
Right. Well, talking of superpowers, with this panel, I'm starting to think that every MBA classroom should have a former owner of a nightclub. The things I need to learn in my early 20s, Sandeep, certainly would have not dented my confidence so much. Tell us from the IMD perspective, because there is an entire leadership journey that you're taking them on, but it's also very mindful of that more personal side of self-awareness. I think that you also bring in psychotherapists to work with your students.
Yeah, that's correct, Matt. So of course, self-awareness is a journey, right? And no one is starting at 0 and no one is at 100. We all start at different place. And of course, you know, as a school, we are here to help them with this journey. And out of the spectrum of tools and you know, that we use to help them with increasing their self-awareness, one of them is these psychoanalysts session that we provide to the MBAs. So if you look at the coaching, leadership coaching, it goes to a deeper layer where it helps them, you know, discover their leadership potential with the help of feedback from the coach, by putting them in leadership experientials. And also, of course, the sessions in the class help. The peer feedback, peer learning part is there as well, because it's a very international class. But by having these psychoanalysts, it really helps us, you know, go a layer deeper, because the more they're aware of their behavior in certain situations, the better leaders they'll become. So for example, imagine a scenario where there was experiential exercise and an MBA behaved in a certain way. They got feedback from their coach and their peer that you behaved this way, and it didn't help the group. But then the MBA can discover more with the PD analyst why I behave that way, like where it's coming from, this behavior, and how can I better manage it, right? So these PD analyst sessions are really helpful. MBAs really value them a lot. They talk about it like, you know, as one of the highlights at the end. Yeah.
Right. Because at the 60,000 foot level, David, you know, it looks simple. You bring together this, you know, very talented group that will go on to successful careers at the top consulting firms and Google and the banks and so on. But where does the journey start? Is it even at the point of applying to London Business School and the mirror that you're holding up to them, and then how you sort of welcome them and start off the program?
Absolutely, Matt. So the selection and admission side of things is crucial. Who we bring in, and whether people have the raw material from them and their experience, and then adding London Business School to that, you know, what can they become? But you've got to start that journey as soon as you start looking at different schools, right back to the decision of, why am I thinking of doing this? What's this for? And you mustn't sleepwalk into it, or be instructed that this is the right thing to do for your career, for this job, by this recruiter. You know, they're the things around the edges. They're the things that can drive you towards choices between schools rather than reason to do it. You know, you've got to have a level of self-awareness that can be developed during the program, but to really understand where you're at, because right from day one, once you're admitted and once we've decided you're made of the right stuff to fit in at the community, right from day one, it's all about examining what your starting point is and what do you need to get you elsewhere to build upon those raw materials that you bring. So you do need a level of confidence. You've got to let your guard down, and that takes confidence. You've got to open yourself up to feedback, to criticism, and also to praise. That's not something people necessarily do easily either. But opening yourself up and trying to figure out, okay, what am I good at? What am I not so good at? And then taking feedback. So on the LBS MBA, we have something called GLAM, Global Leadership Assessment for Managers, which, you know, for the first weeks of the program is all about you. So before you start in accounting and finance and strategy, it's really who you are, where you are, and where you hope to get to. So it's quite revealing. This is the first time some people have done this. So whether it's cultural, or the sector you're in, what's expected of you in terms of breaking everything down, the minutiae of you, is really important to make sure you travel on the journey through the MBA properly and get everything you can out of it. Otherwise, you're just there for the academics. You might as well take an online program, quite frankly. So, and this isn't that case of soft skills, which I really don't like that term, versus the technical skills of the academic subjects. When you're in that sort of that moment of discovery in the early part of the MBA, it's with the school's top faculty. So it's with Linda Grattan, Randall Peterson, and other professors like that, with the core course and the electives. So right from day one, it's about you.
Right. It seems almost paradoxical, David, to think about confidence and at the same time a level of humility, being open to new ideas, because it's not just about being assertive and, well, I've got to take all of these decisive decisions. I mean, you do encourage people to come with a very open mind and be ready to explore, right?
Totally. So if you think of it, maybe there's nothing wrong with being type A's as long as you're a type A listener. Somebody right. who is a belief in themselves and fabulous skills and driven for success, but recognizing that a lot of your success will come from working with others and learning from others. So yeah, having that right balance between confidence and getting over any sense of imposter syndrome you might have, which lots of people do. And it's a very important thing to consider, especially as we build new pipelines of candidates for diversity and inclusion, that everybody believes they belong there. So that the typology of London Business School or any of the schools on this call, there's space for everybody. So giving that reassurance and helping people boost the confidence, and yet managing the attitudes of others is really important. That's where the best faculty come in when it's in the classroom, or best coaches when it's outside the classroom, to help figure out who or what you are and then help you with some adjustments that might be necessary.
Right. So we're going to have to come up with an alternative to soft skills, but if you don't mind, I'll hang on to type A listeners. I think that's a very interesting definition. Katiana, we talk about perhaps just those first days of a class of 40, 50 nationalities all coming together. Paula said that they're a very impressive group. Is there that sense of imposter syndrome, and should I be here, and how are you then able to overcome that?
Yeah, no, good question. And yeah, as I was listening to Paula, I was actually nodding. I don't know if she noticed, because the imposter syndrome is real. And I don't know if it's goes by gender, but I definitely can identify with it. And even though, like I mentioned, I've had a pretty successful career, I've been promoted multiple times, and I do not consider myself an unconfident person. I think I am confident, but business school, in my mind, I think, reflecting back, the reason I had the imposter syndrome, well, number one, in my mind, I thought I would need to be really quantitatively strong. And I didn't think I was. I thought my strengths, like I mentioned before, were on the softer skills side, and that's why I was a little bit scared. If I can crack it, okay. They do, of course, the GMAT test, and the score was fine for me to be accepted. But still, when I looked at my classmates, most of them had either consulting background or engineering background, or very, very strong. We had a lot of folks from India, from China, which those countries stereotypically have a very strong quantitative background. And so I think that was number one, why in my head I had the imposter syndrome. And number two is, in the first days when you start talking to people, you actually realize how smart and bright of a bunch those people are. And inevitably, I think it's human nature, you start comparing. And in your mind, the comparing is not to your favor, right? So I think that's for the causes of the imposter syndrome. And then for the ways to cope with it, I think it just, you'll have to go through it, and you'll have to kind of base your base your newly acquired self-confidence on experience, right? So let's say you go through the exams, you pass them through, I don't know, let's say term one, you go through the assignment, you get a good grade, you go through the feedback from your classmates, you get a positive feedback. And so empirically, you start collecting these pieces of data, and you start realizing, okay, I've done this, so there is no reason to worry. Maybe I do belong here, maybe I do fit in here. So yeah, I guess to summarize, the answer is you just start reasoning with yourself, so to say, inside your head, and start basing your new judgment on the facts, right, which were positive. So yeah.
And I have no doubt that when you start off thinking, gosh, what an impressive bunch, you also then quickly realize what a supportive, collaborative bunch, and how all of you are then working together to overcome this. David had commented, Paula, we could study online and just, absorb lots of technical materials, perhaps through that format. But choosing to go to IESE and the focus that you place on the case method is a very different reality. Now, how does that help that personal development and an individual's confidence to grow?
Yeah, that's a very good point, because I think that the case method brings a very strong element of reality, right? So even though we say that we're out of the real world, right? We're in this bubble where everything happens inside the MBA, and it's sort of a lab, right? Where you can test out, and nothing really serious is going to happen. And the case method brings this pinch of reality, because these are cases that actually happen, right? Real companies in a real moment in time. So what the case method is doing is putting your brain into work, right? But you're not alone, right? And I think that this is also the moment where you start realizing how you think, how that thought process compares to your peers, right? So like as a first-hand testimonial, I think that was the moment where I realized that I was very engineered, right, and very Brazilian as well. I think that there's a great there's a great element of culture in that the case method really brings out, right? Because you start realizing as you're cracking into the case, how you would tackle the problem, right? What your priorities would be, and a lot of doing business is culturally based, right, or influenced at least. And I think that learning that about yourself, because you're coming usually, well, at least I had a very Brazilian experience. Usually when you're surrounded by people that are very similar to you, it's hard to identify what really defines you, right? But when you're in a very diverse environment, your characteristics really stand out. So then you start realizing that, yeah, maybe you are, like, your communication skills are not just average. Maybe they are above average, and you have other people, that have other strengths, but in terms of communication, you're actually really good. Or whenever you have a case, you're going to go into a certain direction where you see other people going into another direction, and not necessarily any of them are wrong, right? They're just different. And then you start realizing what actually are your priorities when you're tackling a problem, right? And that also, I think, comes back into the personal life as well. So I think that the case really makes you understand more about your thought process, your priorities, your values, how you communicate, how you defend your ideas, right? I think that you realize that, and it's also a chance for you to fine-tune maybe some things that you could be improving, right? So in many cultures, it's not that easy or simple to raise your hand and speak out and speak up, and share your opinion. So with the case method, you're constantly challenged to do so, right? Because if you don't, then you don't participate in class, and then you're not going to get a good grade in participation, right? And that's very important. So,
and I guess from your sense of it being a laboratory, both for myself as an individual, but I'm also observing everybody else in the class and how they're adjusting and moving forward. So an intensive reflection. In terms of program delivery, Sandeep, which is your title, you're the Director of Program Delivery. and IMD, has been among the world-class MBA programs for decades and decades. How do you fine-tune and say, do we need a little bit more on the personal development side? That's what students are asking for. But then there are all these issues of crypto and AI that we also want to bring into the program. How do you adjust and find the right mix?
So you're asking the spot-on question, and that's my struggle in my day-to-day work life. So of course, you have limited time. It's a 1-year MBA. It means 11 months, more or less, super intense, with limited time, right? And we need to also make sure that we don't eat up all of their time. We also provide them some time to reflect. So it's always about finding the balance. So for example, last year we thought that, in the sense, from the program design perspective, to make more reflective leaders, it was key to, ramp up on the sustainability, side of business and leadership, because there's no industry out there that's not being impacted by sustainability. And also, how can you make it a business case, right? In the sense, how can you both be sustainable and at the same time be even more profitable than before? So it's about these elements, like, how do you balance it? And I think of it as an Indian spicy dish, basically, where you need to make sure you dose the spices correctly, otherwise the dish will not come out well. But one thing that helps me with that are the electives. So at the end of the year, we have electives where we offer a palette of topics. So if, for example, a topic that we think is key for MBAs to learn, or some MBAs who are going in certain industries will benefit from that, we make sure we put them in the electives. And then, it happens in November, they graduate in December. So by then they know more or less where they are going. So it really helps them then pick and choose. Another, topic that are more critical that we cannot put as electives. For example, the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Ever since before it was also important, but ever since the Black Lives Matters, Me Too movements, all this start to come, it's really important for us to set them up to go in global environments where companies are really taking these very seriously, and not only from work point of view, but also from a humanity point of view. Being a responsible leader when they're out there, it's really important for them to be aware of it and take lead on these topics, not only be aware of it and be a passive absorber of the information when they go out there. So it's a mix of always deciding between what we want to put as a mandatory topic for everybody, or something that we can put as an elective.
And in that dialogue, I imagine multiple stakeholders. There are the students, they express what they want to see, perhaps your corporate connections, what the skills that they're looking for in the job market. So is it a constant listening process to then be able to judge and fine-tune what to emphasize?
Yes, so it's the proximity of IMD to industry really has an impact on our MBA program, because the whole point is to be relevant to the industries out there, right? The current world. So their feedback is key. We also involved student feedback, and that's even mandatory because we recently got accredited as Swiss University Institute. So that's even more important, to integrate student feedback in a formal process. So we have an assurance of learning committee where we analyze, we talk about all of this, and then constantly look to improve the program and see if there's anything missing. But it's a holistic approach that comes from multiple directions, from the faculty, industry, from the students, Right. And the accreditation bodies, of course, they give feedback as well, right? On what we are missing. So we take that and integrate that,
And thank you, Sandeep, for the culinary metaphor. They always work with me. LBS is so selective, David, that I think the closest I will get is the Windsor pub. But let's just imagine, I arrive on day one. You've offered me a place in the MBA program, and I realize that the courses that are about to get started, I can work with the career services team. There's an endless number of clubs and guest speakers that I want to listen to. How do you help students to perhaps prioritize, manage, align the personal with the professional, with the pure fun and everything London has to offer?
So time management is an essential skill for any MBA, and there's a little bit of trial and error in committing to too much and then whittling it down to what you're going to end up being serious about, and it works quite well on the business school MBA, 15 to 21 months, so over 2 years. The leadership positions come a little later, so we help you to prepare for them. So if you're in any leadership role at LBS as a student, whether it's a club lead or on the student association, you can get some help from the institution, and you can attend to the leadership incubator. So, and that's some professional delivery advice about how to develop yourself so that you can practice what you've been learning in action. But you need to select, why are you here? What are you looking to get out of this in the short and medium term? Are there clubs you need to join to help you get into a job or a sector? Are there things that will help keep you healthy physically and mentally? And make sure you give plenty of space to those, especially when times get tough. You know, we're right in the middle now of the internship search for the first years and a very busy academic period. It's tough. And I attended an event recently for our student ambassadors, and you can see who's just landed a job and who has just landed a rejection letter that particular day. But probably the most important thing is to open yourself up and allow your peers to help support you, because they're going through it at the same time. Everybody has highs and lows. They just come in different places. So listen to others, take the guidance as to how much is too much. Set your own pace, but be prepared to make adjustments as you go through the whole thing. If you're a sponsored student and you don't have the job search, you're going to have more time. You know, if you have a business undergrad or quantitative subjects in undergrad, you have some advantages there. So you have to figure out, first of all, passing the MBA, then enjoying the MBA, and then maximizing the MBA. All three are absolutely vital.
Yeah. And Sandeep had talked about the importance for reflection in the midst of all of that. And Katsiana, let's not forget fun too. I mentioned to the viewers at the beginning of this session, with your RSM classmates, you all headed off to the Champagne region of France, and I think it was Moët Chandon that welcomed you. The opportunity to travel or perhaps international study trips, is that also something that you think is contributing to both your personal and professional development?
Yeah, no, the Champagne trip actually was, I think, 2 or 2.5 years after we graduated. So that just goes to tell you, of course, that your network basically of the alumni always grows and you continue spending time together. But when it comes to traveling during the actual, course time, during the actual full-time MBA year, we were super lucky that we were the last cohort that did the whole study in pre-COVID, right? So everything was live. We didn't have anything online, and we did have quite a few international experiences, starting with some sport competitions such as MBAT, so MBA tournament, which basically is happening between all of the business schools, and people are competing in various sports: volleyball, basketball, tennis, whatever. IESE hosted spring games as well. This is the one that I personally participated in. It was taking place in Barcelona, and it was amazing. The study trip, in my case, it was to Lisbon, which was based on social innovation at the end of third term, so in August, which was the perfect time to be in Portugal. And finally, one optional one, which was the gala in Milan, also organized by one of the alumni from the Bocconi Business School. So yeah, a lot of opportunities for international travel, which had a massive element of fun, but also, of course, the element of networking. Because to me, I think the biggest value that I derived from MBA is the massive network of, like I said, brightest and smartest people all across the globe, who now, of course, work in various really established and good companies, whether they're small or big. Those travels, and when you spend time outside the classwork, you both learn and have fun and also expand your network. So yeah, definitely those were some of the biggest highlights, I think, of the year for me.
Right. I'm mindful that I'm sharing this panel with 4 of the top European business schools, and in 1 minute you talked about being in Paris, being in Barcelona, being in Milan. This is something really so distinct, I think, for the European experience. And Paula perhaps picks up on a comment that you made. You know, came in with your Brazilian perspective, and suddenly you have what, 50, 60 nationalities surround you, gaining that wider worldview and global awareness. That's fascinating on a personal level, but also potentially incredibly valuable for your subsequent professional career.
Yes, and I think that especially for candidates coming or students coming to studying in Europe, I think that the international element is one of people's biggest objectives, right? Because I think that we are known as being very international, and I think that most European schools will find themselves with 40, 50 plus nationalities in class. And so people are looking into having international careers as well, right? And although diversity and internationality is very exciting, it can also be very challenging, right? So if you, in the MBA, obviously we have our problems, we have our conflicts, but as I said before, it's a lab, right? So if you really don't like people from different cultures and you want to survive the MBA until it's over, you can. But if you're looking into an international career, you actually have to deal with people that will be very different from you, right? And handling these differences in a day-to-day is very important. And I think that during the MBA, you have the chance and the opportunity to develop the skills that will make you thrive, not only survive, but thrive in an international environment, right? Where I think that you can also adapt, right? You're always going to be yourself. You have your values and your culture that you're always going to bring. But I can say that I toned down my Brazilianness after the MBA. And, you know, I saw some things that were maybe holding me back professionally because of my culture. I could work on that, right? So a quick example, Brazilians tend to take things very personally. Right. So if you receive a feedback, or you know, like if you have a meeting and someone gave an opinion on something that you did, like Brazilians, we tend to be very offended, you know. And then in a work environment, it's difficult. If you take everything very seriously and very personally, then you're not going to grow, right? So the MBA is your opportunity to like understand where you could improve, you know, like get inspired by others, right? People are so different, and there are so many people that you say, wow, I really wish I could be like that, right? And then you have the opportunity to work on that, and then take that to your future experience, right? Like I work in a very international team. My team is made of 20 people, and I think we're like 17 nationalities. So, well, I'm a biased sample, but I think that the whole experience that I got at the IESE was fundamental for me to be able to be successful in my current team.
Right. So with the very purposeful decision, Sandeep, to come to Lausanne and know that I'm not doing this alone. You know, I have 90, 100 plus classmates. But Katsiarina had also talked about the fun that they're still having together 3 years later, drinking champagne. Talk to us about that network of classmates, sharing the highs and the lows, but also how it can extend and continue to support you well beyond the year that you spent doing your MBA.
So of course, self-awareness is a journey. You know, when they start, they are put in, you know, as Paula said, in lab. They are put in different group situations, different challenging situations, and that can create a lot of conflicts because, of course, you know, as Paula mentioned, there are some cultures can be a little bit more sensitive to feedback. Others are very direct. So it's a friction. There's a lot of frictions, right, at different stages. And with all these frictions and conflicts and learning and the process and the system that's there to support you and make sure they stabilize you, the bond gets created. It's a very strong bond. So, you know, having a small class, this year we have 87. So towards the end of the year, it's such an intense experience. They really bond well, and it really, they carry it forward, right? So when they graduate, they make sure they mentor each other, they support each other, they become like, you know, a support group in a way. I always tell the MBAs when they are going through like a huge conflict in their group, I always tell them that now you may hate your group mates, but don't forget in 20, 30 years time, you'll be reaching out to them to look for jobs for your children. So in the sense, this is the network, it's a lifetime network. These little things matter less. It's a learning journey, but look at the big picture. So yeah, the impact of network is significant, and that's, I think, one of the best strength of an MBA program is to have this international network that's so global. It's out there anywhere you go in the world. You have people who are there, glued together through this experience that they had together. Yeah.
And I like the power of thinking of it in terms of your own kids. Who could turn that down? That really turns up the volume. David, I mentioned the FT will be publishing their annual ranking, and it will have great figures for all of your schools, for post-MBA salary, for mobility. That often focuses in the immediate period after the MBA, and your colleagues, Zoe and others that work so hard on internships and subsequent post-MBA placement. But just let's take that further. As you think about taking charge of your career, of your life, of what you want in life, as fundamental as that, how does the MBA then pay a dividend, not just immediately as you come out, but in the 5 and then the 10 years that follow?
It's vital that you go into this thinking about your long-term career and the rest of your life, really, because this is this period of time will change your life in many ways. Linda Grattan, one of our professors of organizational behavior, talks about the future of work, and none of us, me being the exception, will stay in any one company or sector forever. And you need to be agile, you need to be resilient to be able to make changes, and you can either control those changes, or sometimes the changes are inflicted upon you by market situations. But you have to prepare yourself for several careers within the time space of what used to be a fairly linear career, and that takes some thinking out in terms of preparing yourself for it. So everybody, especially at this time of the year, becomes very obsessed about either internship or post MBA work, and of course you would. There are loans to pay back. There's proving yourself that you can do this. There's a little bit of the sheep thinking of heading into yet another presentation from a fantastic consulting firm, but you've got to have one eye on where you hope this will take you, so that when you are 20 years out, you can be very proud of the steps you made and the changes you made as well. So be open-minded, but set your expectations and have your plan B and plan C ready, because you'll probably need it at some point.
Right. Now, I feel spoiled having all 4 of you. I'm mindful, Katsiana, of course, with your leadership role at Amazon demands on your time. So I have one very, very, very quick final question for you. Something that you didn't read about the MBA at Rotterdam. It wasn't in the brochures, it wasn't in all of the spreadsheets that you'd put together, but just one thing that you said, if I wanted to share an aspect of the experience that I'd had, what would it be?
I don't know if this is not going to be counterproductive to the attendees to know that, but I wish I did not focus and worried as much on the grades, and actually spend more time focusing on the people and the relationships. Because I think for me, that was, like I mentioned before, the most important outcome and the value of the MBA. But yeah, no one would tell you, especially, of course, like the program leaders from the school, or don't worry about the grades. Of course, you go there for the knowledge and for the information. But if I were to kind of redistribute or rearrange a little bit my time, as you rightly mentioned before, there is so many things going on, you have to prioritize. So I think I would have put a little bit more of my brain space and also emotional space into the relationship versus the pure knowledge and reading and grades and the assignments and the tests and things like that. So,
well, thank you. The fact that our viewers now know that before they show up, it will be very liberating. I know that you have to run, but I would like to then frame that. Thank you, Katsiana, for being with us in the last 45 minutes. Paula, David, and Sandeep, if you can just stay on, because you've welcomed cohorts, generations coming through your schools. You've thought about how to share the experience on your websites and through the info sessions that you put together. So a final question for all of you. Paula, if there's one thing you would want our viewers to know about the MBA, about IESE, about what it can do for them at that personal level, something for them to think about, what would it be?
Okay, that's very deep.
We're raising the bar.
Yes, but I think I'm going to go back to what you said in the beginning in your introduction, where this business school is something that will really change the course of your life, right? So I think it's important that people put a lot of thinking and reflection on what their motivations are, you know, like what they expect to get out of the MBA, so they choose the right school that they should be attending, right? Because I think that we have excellent choices, especially in Europe, but the offerings are very different, right? And each one might develop something more or specific aspects or focus in a specific aspect of personal development. So depending on what you're looking for the most, you're going to have a better fit.
Yeah, life-changing, transformational. Of course, you talked about this complete shift in direction. Sandeep, for you, one piece of advice, something that almost intangible to capture, what would it be?
So for me, it will be, so for example, a lot of our MBAs, when they come, they have, often masters, sometimes they even have a PhD. And what I tell them is that this is maybe one of the last years of your life that you will take off your work career. You may do other things to just focus on your personal development, both in terms of soft and hard skills. So you can, do continuous learning in parallel to your work, but, you may not take a full year off, right? So it's a unique, year of your life. Use that as a reflective space, as a space where you are trying different possible selves, reinventing yourself, rebranding yourself, and creating the bonds that will last lifetime. So I see is that a milestone there in their career and their lives, because it really changes the way they are as people, not only in their professional lives, but also at home. And this is the feedback we get from the MBAs, that it really changed them at a very deeper level. So what I tell the future MBAs who want to, like, for example, come for a program like IMD is to be ready for that. Prepare yourself mentally, to go deeper, be open, be like a sponge, that's not filled with water or something else. Be an empty sponge, and then be ready to absorb. So come with a learning mindset, and I think this is where they will benefit a lot from it, and they will help others benefit as well, because the peer learning part is really important in an MBA program. Right. So yeah, that's the advice I can give. Yeah.
And if David, if you're remotely thinking, I've had two others answer this question, I've got time to think about it, remember that it'll be the last words of the panel, so it's got to be good. But over 25 years watching people come into the school, you've mentioned some of the staff, faculty, what really vibrates for you and says yes, this is something quite extraordinary?
I'll try and think of something slightly different. So I think everyone achieves so much on and after the MBA at any of our schools that it's perhaps some of the unexpected turns that are important. So some advice I'd give is don't regret what you think you haven't achieved or you've missed out on. So whether it's a job or a particular course or whatever, but acknowledge that you're opening yourself to unexpected opportunities. Embrace everything, explore and enjoy, because it is a unique time.
Right. So if, as the host of the panel, I try to bring together your three ideas, I've got a life-changing gift of exploration, or certainly have no regrets. And I think this is something that we hear again and again from your students, from your alumni. It was just this extraordinary year or 2 years of their life with no regrets, everything that they've learned. For you to be able to capture that and share that with our audience is really what we're trying to achieve at Centre Court, and the three of you do it so well. I've thanked you for wonderful panels in the past, but that thrill never leaves me. Leanne knew how excited I was with starting day 2 with the three of you. So Paula, Sandeep, David, Thank you for a great session together.